Hello, friends. This week, well, I guess maybe some of our listeners have heard Seb talk about the Italian problem in previous podcasts, but for the first time here this week, he shares with us and explains with us what happened, its effect on him and his family relations, and yeah, his journey towards I guess greater peace of mind. Obviously, he'll be the first to admit that he's still on it, but I was very grateful to be part of this. Very proud of Seb for coming so far, and I'm sure many people will resonate with this. Thanks for listening, guys. All the best.
Sebastian, Siracusa, what's the crack?
Not too bad, my friend, not too bad. Saying before the podcast that I went on a little run before. Well, I say little, I mean, by the looks of me, you think I'd done a half marathon or a marathon, but to try and clear my head, or as Joe Rogan says, exercise those demons. So
Was
tried
it
to get rid of. I mean, I almost died, but yeah. I tried to push a pace. I mean, if anyone even follows me on Strava, they will have a serious laugh at that. But let's say the pace was relative.
Okay.
There was no Mo Farah going on. But as far as I'm concerned, it was pretty quick. So it was I think much needed. Hopefully, I mean, I guess you'll be the judge of that once we do this podcast. But I'm feeling good, feeling somewhat peaceful.
Happy to hear, man. Happy to hear.
Yeah, man. How's it going over in Italy? I know you've moved over there now. You're making fresh pasta every day. I feel like you're like living to every stereotype that possibly is.
Yeah, it's funny. It surely isn't going to be like this all the time. I think, like you said, it might be just the introduction.
They have to be. I swear to God, if you are still making fresh pasta, even like 2 weeks from now, then I don't know what family you're living with, but like this is ridiculous. Like, I'm just expecting you to be like, oh yeah, we're gonna make fresh homemade rice and homemade water from the pump outside. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know what is happening over there, but like it is ridiculous. I feel like you've caught up to my 24 years of Italian life in about 2 weeks. I swear to God. Nah.
It's good though. It's obviously very strange, kind of. And I feel like I'm putting pressure on my girlfriend because I'm obviously entering her world in a very real sense, you know. And it's a difficult thing to maneuver. I'm sure Louisa experienced something similar when she moved to Madrid, but because I have no like close friends here. It's every kind of link so far is through her, and so I'd imagine that's tough on her. But we were having good chats about it and taking it day by day.
Beautiful stuff.
Yeah.
That's all you can do.
That's it, man.
That's all you can do.
So,
I think...
Sorry.
Yeah, I think that probably... I mean, people have listened to the intro somewhat, but I think it's best to briefly give like some sort of outline as to why we're doing this podcast, why all of a sudden I'm on the other side of the table and in the hot seat, so to speak. But basically, from my end, I think from our end, to be quite honest, but we've been recording podcasts and we've had like amazing guests on, as you like to say. We always try to get them to bare their soul.
Yes.
And that's been great to listen and to share that with them and to share that with our listeners as well. And it's been really important to do so. But we kind of felt that, or I at least felt like I couldn't really go on much further without doing a podcast solely related to what I would definitely call my biggest struggle, my biggest fight with mental health, because sometimes I semi-allude to it in other podcasts with other guests, depending if it's obviously the right context and the right scenario. And I just didn't want to keep on kind of alluding to something. I'd rather just get it out there in the open. And then from now on, if we have, which I know we're going to have guests that talk about, you know, sexual abuse and so on. We've already had Dr. Marie Keenan.
Mm-hmm.
Then I can kind of talk at it in a freedom and know that, you know, if listeners want to come back and they want to go, what actually happened with Seb, then they've got this podcast as like a reference point, rather than it being like this weird kind of, not secret, but almost like semi-secret that's there in the background. It kind of looms over. Mm-hmm. And it also just didn't feel fair as well, because like you said, we ask our guests to bare their soul, and then here I am as the host, not really doing that. Yeah. So to avoid being a hypocrite for much longer, thought it was probably best to get this podcast underway. And in the interest of fairness, I think it's best to say that this is the second time of recording. The first time we recorded this, I wanted to do it for those reasons that I've just explained, but I don't think mentally I was in the right place, and there was a lot of anger involved, I think. It came off more as ranting and raving and just hurt, rather than what I hope this podcast offers, which at the end of the day, people will interpret it how they want to interpret it. But I hope that this podcast offers some sort of hope, some sort of light at the end of the tunnel, so that if anyone's going through this, or anyone who knows that anyone who's going through something similar, they can say, look, I'm just listening to this random guy and he's gone through it all as well, and he seems to be in a better place. So I don't want it to come off as like I've been in this Zen kind of mindset or whatever the case may be when this happened, because that's the case. It's been 3 or 4 years now to get to this place, and I still haven't found the complete inner peace that I'd like to. But let's say instead of having tsunamis, I've got surfable waters these days. So we're still on the journey to find that placid lake, but I'll make do with surfable waters at the moment.
But before you continue, man, I think it's important to note that you were saying, I didn't want to appear to be a hypocrite. But also, and we've alluded to it in a few podcasts, I think, before, where we also need to give credence to the possibility that the person isn't there yet to express this in such a way. I say I want people to bare their soul, but I want people to bare their soul if they're in the place where they feel like they can bear that soul, or if they've interrogated the soul and then they feel like they can bear it, And I know for a lot of people, it's super difficult. So I'm proud of you for wanting to do this. It's definitely not like the last word I would use to describe this has been easy or tranquil. And man, I'm real proud.
I appreciate that. And also I just want to say a little caveat or a little footnote before I say anything else, which is when I describe the situation and describe everything that I've been through, I can only talk about things from my personal experience, because it wouldn't be right for me to try to imagine what other people have gone through in this whole story and what they felt. So I can only ever talk about this from a personal experience. And with that said, I understand it's not a game of top trumps, of course not, but I understand that what I have felt and experienced and gone through and everything else is literally, it's so minute compared to the key protagonist in this story. And I don't want it to come across as me trying to play the victim or anything else like it. I just want it to be an honest conversation, because I've had these conversations with many of my friends, some I haven't had it with, but I want it to be a case where people can look and say, well, look, here's at least one option forward, and here's at least one story where they've tried to work it through. So I don't want to make out that I'm the victim in this, because that's definitely not the case. But I can't do this podcast justice if I was trying to talk about it in third person and try to talk about what the protagonists went through and how they feel, because as much as I've spoken to them, I will never be able to empathize fully with them, and so it'd be a complete injustice to try to even attempt that would be silly. So I just want to put that out there first and foremost, that anyone who suffered with sexual abuse on a first-hand basis, I can't imagine the pain that you've gone through. And this is not me trying to act up to that. This is all this is that actually with sexual abuse survivors, what I've seen is that it doesn't actually just solely, it's one of those weird things where it doesn't just affect the survivor. It really has like a huge ripple effect on anyone and everyone who's connected to that survivor, to varying levels, obviously depending on how close you are to that survivor. And I'm not going to mention names nor their true relation to me, because again, they might not want me to do so. But put it this way, I couldn't be much closer to that person if I tried. So the ripple effect was fairly profound. So I just want to put that out there. This is not me trying to play the victim or anything else like it. Just trying to put my story across.
Thanks for highlighting that. Yeah. I guess we can start then by maybe talking about the event initially, when it was discovered or uncovered.
Yeah.
And then initial reactions.
Yeah. So basically what happened was, for those who know me, they know that I'm half Italian, have a very or had at least a very close link to my Italian family, very identified as an Italian, even though I was brought up in England, lived in England, because my household, the culture in my household was very Italian, and we were closer to the Italian side of the family than the English side since day dot. It's just how it's always been. Very stereotypical, that image of the Italian families. I mean, it couldn't be more stereotypical. That's just how it was. Basically, what happened, I can't even remember the dates because they've all kind of blurred, and maybe I think some coping mechanism, maybe I've tried to block them out. But long story short, we had we have an Italian house in the mountains. It was like the big house where it was my mum's and dad's, but we would always invite the family up. So every summer we would go over there, myself, my sister, mum and dad, and then like the cousins and the aunties and uncles and everyone else would come up because it was big enough to have them all together. So it was a great little escape. And that would have been, I think, since I was like 10 years old, maybe 9, 10, something around that age, all the way through. Every single year we'd go there. Anyway, this one year, maybe about 3 or 4 years ago, I think it was, for once, I wasn't going to go to Italy. I was doing a trip around South America with my friends from university. And that was a beautiful trip. Anyway, we came back. And as I came back, my mum said, I need to tell you something. And I thought, my mum and dad had got divorced or something along these lines. Anyway, I came back home, and then she proceeded to tell me what happened. And again, I'm going to try really hard to protect the identities of everyone involved as much as I can. But basically, long story short, one of my uncles had been sexually abusing someone in the family for about 7 to 8 years, I think. Roughly about that. So every summer he would use that as his opportunity to sexually abuse someone in the family. Obviously, we had no idea. And that summer that I didn't go, everyone was planning to go to the mountains and go to the house. And this person in question broke down and told some members of my family that, they didn't want to go, this, that, and the other. And, the kind of consensus was, oh, look, we know it's a bit boring because there's no Wi-Fi or anything like that. It's very, very, it's like a rural retreat, basically. And, for a young person, it's not the most fun, to be quite honest. And so I think that was like, oh, but no one in my family cries. So it was a bit like, well, look, we know it's boring, but I mean, come on, there's no need to cry about it. And then they proceeded to tell the story. And yeah, that was basically it. And then in the fallout of that, we then found that this uncle in question had actually sexually molested one of my aunties, so one of the sisters of his wife, when she was a lot younger, because there's quite a big age gap in between so it's my dad and then 3 sisters. Mm-hmm. That's the Italian side of the family, and there's quite a big age gap in between those, and between the youngest and the oldest. And the uncle is he sexually molested one of the aunties when she was a lot younger, and she decided, I think it was only once, but she decided to kind of basically keep that secret, hoping that she would be the only ever victim. And basically she would take that to her grave. Anyway, when this story came out that actually he'd done it to someone else in the family, then that story also came out in the open as well, which created a bit of a thing, because it's like, well, why didn't you tell us? Because if you told us, maybe we could have avoided the situation, and blah, blah, blah. That was the whole thing. But not the worst part, because I mean, obviously the worst part is the abuse, but the close second, and I would say almost the most disappointing part was the fact that a lot of not all, but a lot of the family members actually leapt to the uncle in question's defense, and basically said, oh, it's bullshit, like it never would have happened, like there's no way, like he's the nicest man. And it's true, like he always seemed, I mean, if you were to say who was the nicest person in my family, I would have said him. Do you know what I mean? He just had that character, but that's exactly what it was a character, right? And so it was, and I understand for people who, like, for his sons and daughters, it was really hard to accept. Imagine being told that your father is a pedophile. That's not an easy thing to accept, and I understand that fully. But anyway, the disappointing thing was that a lot of people basically denied it ever happened, or just didn't believe it, despite the fact that a woman, he'd molested a girl who is now a woman, who is telling the rest of the family, look, it happened to me as well. Like, it's not just this young girl telling a story. I can account and I can attest that this also happened to me. And I'm a 40, 50-year-old woman who understands what sexual activities are, because the kind of the notion or the connotation was, oh well, how in Italy, like, we're all very cuddly and kissy and blah blah, like maybe she just misunderstood type. That was like the connotation that was. And look, you don't misunderstand those types of things, and you don't misunderstand them for 7 or 8 years. So that happened, which was obviously devastating. And then like about a year later, my mum and dad got divorced. Some of it for different reasons, but I'm pretty sure that was the straw that broke the camel's back. So it was the kind of like a really stormy year or so. And then the fallout of that has been, for me anyway, like I said, I'm only going to talk about myself, but the fallout for that for me has been quite impactful, because it threw a lot of things into question, some things that I thought I'd never questioned before. So it's been a journey trying to work through those questions, work through some really dark feelings, to try and be a bit more compassionate and to get to the place that I am today. And I know there's still a lot of work ahead of me, but yeah. So I think I've tried not to like go on too much, but that's more or less the summary of the story.
And as you mentioned before, we obviously I obviously can't. We can't talk about the victim in this case, or the person who received this. But I guess what the question that comes to mind initially is, what do you think has changed in the last few months when we initially recorded the episode to talk about this, and now? And I think there'll be a nice follow-on questions from this.
A couple of things. We've recorded, so this is obviously going to come out in November, but we've recorded some podcasts for next year. One of which was with Richard Moore, and that was a podcast all about forgiveness, and how one of the things he said was, which I've tweeted recently, but that forgiveness is a gift to yourself. Yeah, and I don't think it resonated, or I don't think I realized how much it resonated with me in that moment. But it definitely had a massive ripple effect, and that stayed with me for quite a while. But I think more than that, or that was kind of secondary. The first thing that kind of happened was for the last 3 or 4 years, but very acutely in the last couple of months, I'd gone through a bit of a huge identity crisis. And what I mean by that is basically the family that I had, not just myself, we had all put on a pedestal, this Italian family, this notion of family, this unbreakable bond between the Siracusas. Well, that got broken pretty substantially. And it triggered something in me that actually you brought a light on inadvertently by moving to Italy to be with your girlfriend Chiara. And obviously, unless I'm unaware, I think I'm the only Italian friend you have. So you would, and we have a lot of conversations anyway because of the podcast and so on. And so you would tell me, but even before you'd moved out, you were telling me little things about Chiara and about like a family and all like Italian anecdotes basically, which I understand, because who's better for you to tell that to? I'm the one who can relate to that the most. And kind of unexpectedly and I told you, but it became like a trigger. And whilst I was very happy for you, it really brought up some really horrible emotions for me. And everything that I'd once been proud of about Italy all of a sudden became a source of real resentment and real shame. Shame would be the big overarching feeling there. And I told you, and I said, look, not that I don't want you to ever talk to me about Italy, but because there was one point where it almost felt like it was daily. And I was like, I'm not sure I can deal with this. So I told you we could kind of slow that down somewhat. But then I just got thinking, and I was like, well, how ridiculous is this? I mean, I can't even be happy for my friend because he's moving to Italy to a family that has nothing to do with mine, to a city that has nothing to do with the city that I'm from. Or, you know, the only, I mean, it's a big link, but the only link is Italy, but it's a very abstract link in any way, because within Italy there's so many different things. And yet everything you said was a trigger, and I thought, oh, this can't carry on. I mean, because, okay, for now it's Jim, but then what? Then I'm going to have a mate that's going to go on holiday to Italy, or then I'm going to, whatever the case may be. And all of a sudden, everything that was a source of pride became a great source of shame. And that was really hard to deal with. And I didn't really know what that meant or what to do. But I just kind of, through talking to Richard, and then we spoke to recently to Adam, our very own Rafiki. And I just felt like I needed to take ownership of the situation within myself. I couldn't let these people who I think have abandoned us and have been traitors to us. I couldn't let them have any more power over how I felt about anything, whether that's Italy, whether that's about the notion of family, whether that's whatever the case may be. They were having too much. They had too much power over how I felt about myself, and it was getting ridiculous and it was getting out of hand. And so I realized quite sharply that I needed to get that in order pretty quick, because that could really spiral. And also because I love Italy and I love being Italian and I love having Siracusa as my last name, and I love having brown skin and brown eyes and a thick black beard. All of that stuff I love, and I don't want to be shame or feel shame about that at all. I want to shout that from the rooftops. And that's one thing that I've seen with sexual abuse, which is really, I think, the most insidious thing about it, is that it permeates shame, but the shame isn't from the perpetrator. It's actually from the survivors and the surrounding members who love that survivor. So instead of the perpetrator being like, oh, I'm so sorry, this is such an awful thing I've done, they feel almost no. I mean, this person in particular, he hasn't even accepted it. He says it's a lie. So he clearly feels no shame whatsoever. And yet it's my family and the ones who we love who we have to take on the shame. And I just thought, this is ridiculous. We have done nothing wrong. Obviously, the protagonist even more so. She's, I mean, a completely innocent person in this whole fiasco, as is everyone else. And yet now we feel shame. We're the ones who haven't gone to Italy for 3 or 4 years. I mean, what's that all about? I mean, if we don't want to go to Italy, it's because we shouldn't want to go to Italy because we prefer to go to Spain or wherever the case may be, but not because we feel shamed to go there. And that's how it's felt for the last 3 or 4 years. And I've just had enough, to be quite honest. And I'm trying to take back control. And it's just little things. I'm listening now to my Italian Spotify playlist that I've always had. I'm cooking Italian food again. Yesterday I cooked pasta brodo, which is a winter dish that my nan cooked me, and it's my favorite. It's not very special, but it's my favorite dish because she cooked it for me. A month ago, that would have been a massive trigger. After this podcast, I'm going to make some tomato sauce and fill the jars out for the rest of winter. Again, would have been another massive trigger, but now I'm looking forward to it because I can't let these people have any more power over how I feel about anything, whether that's my identity or anything else, you know. And I think that's probably like the biggest spark that showed me that I needed to change.
I think it's very admirable, man, because I don't know, I when we would talk, obviously we have different opinions on some things, and very often my opinion on stuff would be kind of rejected by you because I haven't had such an experience, you know, like my opinion is kind of this opinion in this nice world where I haven't had, you know, this particular instance or this particular burning anger inside of me. And, you know, I could quote someone, I could quote the Dalai Lama, or I could quote whoever, but it just it meant nothing to you, or it meant very little to you because you're like, nah, I have this in me. You don't know. And I'm sure that there are people listening that also have this. And this is why I think it's admirable, because me and you are very different people. I mean, we share a lot of things as well, but we are very different. And what's been really great for me to see is the development from you, because even 6 months ago, more than 6 months ago, it was just pure anger, you know.
Yeah.
And it's really impressive for me to see this as well, that you say, hey, no, like the shame that I feel is why am I feeling this shame? And like you said, it's like you're letting these people, like these events, shape your future, shape your present, you know.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't know, tell me if I'm wrong, this is probably my next question. Like, did you think that this was unget out ofable? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Inescapable, I think, is the word you're looking for.
I'm gonna blame my Italian
Yeah.
brain. Yeah.
I know. Any Irish listener is going to think smug British bastard. No, I get what you're saying, and yeah, look, I'll be honest. Last night I had a dream that I'd went, and I used the word dream, not nightmare, very pointedly, because I had a dream that I was in Italy, and I did some horrible things to that man, and said some horrible things, and physically did some horrible things in my dream. And the reason I say dream and not nightmare, because it wasn't scary to me. In the dream, I was almost enjoying it and relishing that possibility to do those things. And maybe that's the scariest thing of all, was that it wasn't a nightmare. And when this first came out, the whole fiasco, I had two clear thoughts. One was, I want to do him serious, irreparable harm. I mean, if we were living in the Middle Ages where DNA testing wasn't a thing anymore and it was a lot easier to get away with murder, maybe I would have done that. And I'm not saying that lightly. I'd contemplated loads of. I mean, I told you about how when Corona came out, my first thought was, how can I get to Italy and infect him? That it wasn't, how's the rest of my family? Because Italy had it really bad to start with. There was none of that. My first initial thought was, how can I go over there and infect him? And that was a really dark, horrible kind of like feeling within myself that I didn't recognize. And again, I use the word shame because now that I'm in a better place, and like I said, I still have those feelings. I had a dream. Maybe that's because I was having this podcast. I knew I was going to have this podcast the next day or whatever. And I think maybe Carl Jung can answer those questions. But the point being, I'm now ashamed that I let him have that power over me, and that I was weak enough to have those feelings, because I don't consider myself a violent person in any way, shape, or I've never had a fight. I've not even like a little punch up in a bar or anything, nothing even close. So to go from that to then all of a sudden not just wishing harm on him, but semi-planning how you could do it, was really dark and something I really didn't like in myself. I don't know if it's completely inescapable. I definitely don't want to kill him anymore. That said, I don't want him to live for a long time. If tomorrow I got the call that he'd that God or the devil, let's say, I think the devil had knocked on his door and said, "Time's up, my friend," I think I'd be a very happy man. But at least now, go on.
Because I think you're being maybe a bit harsh. I don't know what the word is, but you say, I was weak enough to let this happen. But I can't describe. I don't think I can't see this as weakness. I see this as a very normal reaction to an incredibly traumatic event to a family member. And
I think I get what you're saying, but I think now, upon reflection, I think that's an easy cop out. You know, we spoke with Adam, which is a podcast that will come out. I feel like I'm like promoting podcasts that are going to come out next year, but which is a podcast that will come out next year. And we said about how, you know, what does successful mean? And when we look to a successful person, what does that mean? Are we looking to, you know, footballers who are rich and famous? Is that what we deem success? Or are we looking at personally inside, someone who has achieved a level of comfort inside and inner peace? And, you know, there are some amazing people in history who have achieved that. And that's what I now think of as successful. And, you know, I think the stellar person would be Nelson Mandela, you know, and he was put in prison by white people, racists. And when he came out, instead of, which a lot of us would have said, like you said, the normal thing to do would be to, wow, fuck every white person. Now let's flip the script. I'm a black president in power. Now all of you lot, I'll have my vengeance type thing. He did the complete opposite. And that's why he's so revered. And that's why he's not one of the many. And it's that thing of to be uncommon amongst uncommon men, that phrase. And that's what I kind of strive to be. I'm not saying I'll ever get there, but at least that's something that keeps me on the straight and narrow. And I think it's understandable to have the feelings that I had, but I think a stronger character, someone who was more centered, someone who had more peace naturally, wouldn't have allowed those thoughts to even enter their mind. And if the minute they did, they would have battered them away. I don't want to speak for other people, but I can't imagine Adam feeling that way, for example. Do you know what I mean?
Okay.
And
okay.
Yeah.
This is interesting, because I would say that this isn't necessarily, like you say, it was weakness. This person came to these thoughts, but I would say you're saying you've had the luxury or luckiness, or however you want to say, the fortune of coming across people like Adam, or coming across people who have very articulately and very compassionately expressed certain opinions, and how to flip the script. And I think if we didn't have this perspective, if I know I wouldn't, I don't know about you, but like, if you didn't have these people as examples who have been able to show huge compassion within themselves, and then think I could do this, or this with Adam in particular, the idea of thoughts not being representative of you per se. Like, if you didn't have this as knowledge, then it's very easy to look around, look at TV, look at the movies we watch. This is what happens. Yeah. Something bad happens. People react with violence and violent thoughts. So I don't think it's weakness. I think in a certain context, it's the norm, and I don't think it's fair to say that this person is weaker than Adam, because I think Adam would probably admit in one day of his life he was very reactive and
Yeah, I get what you're saying. It's just, look, I'm not talking about anyone else. I'm purely talking about myself. So I don't want to say anyone else is weak if they've had those feelings. I don't know what anyone else's situation is. I just look back on it. I'm back on it now, and I go, well, that was a test of character. I suppose one thing you could say is I passed because I didn't do it. At the end of the day, look, some people literally they follow through with those thoughts. I didn't. The other thing that I had that was very prominent in my thought process was, this is a moment which will define you for the rest of your life. Like how you act. When I first got told the fiasco, I was like, how I act in the immediacy will define everything going forward, and you can't go back in time. And so seeing the reaction of my family, which was definitely unexpected, we assumed they would come riding over the hilltops, and that was not the case. I knew that my dad couldn't go over to Italy because he was too heartbroken. I mean, this is his family at the end of the day. These are his sisters and whatever else that are, you could say, betraying him. And so he, if he went there, maybe he would have done something terrible and got himself in real trouble. So he couldn't even take that risk. And my mum doesn't speak Italian, My sister's too young anyway. What's she going to do? So I knew that I had to fly out, and I knew that I had to have a family meeting with the sisters, not with him, because again, I didn't know what I would do if I saw him. So I made sure that he wouldn't be there, but I had a family meeting with the sisters. And that's one thing I am proud of, because I know that the person in question knows now unequivocally that I have their back, and that when the chips are down, they can count on me. And if there's one thing I'm proud of, or one thing I'm grateful for out of this whole shitstorm, is that it granted me that opportunity to show that. Because I think it's very easy for us to say to people, oh yeah, man, anything you need, I'm there for you, and so on and so forth. We all say it because I think when we say it, we genuinely mean it, But then I truly believe that everyone in their life has at least one, if not a few, but at least one moment in their life where they can really act on the principles that they say they believe in. And I knew that this was that time for me. Maybe there's more to come, but I knew that this was that time. And I'm proud that I acted that way, and I managed to keep a calm head in that situation, and I knew what I needed to do. And so I'm thankful for that. But yeah, it was a difficult one, because ultimately I knew I was going over there to listen to to talk to people and to listen to people who I knew didn't believe in the situation. And if I wanted to smash their heads together and be like, oh, is this really happening? Has this family really come to this? But I knew that needed to be done, and it was something that needed to be done in person, and it needs to be done face to face. It wasn't a phone call or a letter. Wouldn't have done anything. As it happened, the conversation didn't really achieve much. But if I could go back in time, I would do it exactly the same all over again. And that's one thing that I am happy for. So yeah, it's been a bit of a whirlwind.
That's pretty cool that you can do that, because I think many of us look back on things that we regret and feel bad about it. But it's very nice that you have had the opportunity, or you can look back and say, no, this was a test of character, and this is something that reflected my character or my fundamental values. Yeah,
I don't want to give myself too much of a pat on the back, because the more I think about it, I mean, I think only a therapist could really answer these questions. But I've started questioning things that I did, apart from that one thing that I am proud of. I started questioning other things that I did, and I thought, could that have been? Why did you do that? So, for example, one of the, I moved to Italy. I moved to Madrid. What kind of around when this was all happening? Now, that was a decision I think I always would have made, because I wanted to live in Madrid, and it is what it is. That said, I am almost certain that there was a part of me that knew that I had to flee. I had to leave. I had to get distance, because it wasn't just Italy. It was something, and obviously then the divorce happened. So then that was like another added thing. And so within like the four walls of my family home, so to speak, it was something that even in the good moments, it was like this like darkness that was always lurking. And I knew that I had to, I think subconsciously, it wasn't a conscious decision. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to Madrid because I have to flee this situation and get space. But I think subconsciously, there was definitely a part of that. And now I think, did I have to go to Madrid in such haste? Could I not have stayed a year or two and worked it through with my family? Because they were all going through it as well. It's not just me. Like I said, I'm not even the protagonist in this. And, then you've got my mum and my dad and everything else. Like, everyone was struggling in their own way. And I packed my bags and went to Madrid. And that's something that at the time I didn't connect the two at all. And I can honestly say that I didn't connect the two. But in hindsight, I am starting to see that there were potentially subconscious dots that were very much connected. And maybe if I had my time again, knowing that I'd always move to Madrid anyway, did I necessarily have to move there and then? Maybe I could have waited. Maybe I could have, gone through it with my family in a more close fashion, I suppose, and kind of be there for each other, rather than my way of dealing with it subconsciously, I believe, was just to be like, I need to start fresh here. I just need something new, because everything was a reminder. Anything was a reminder. Everything was a trigger. And I'm not proud about that. And like I said, if I could go back in time, I think I would have done things differently there.
It's something that I think a lot of people can relate with, because we've all been in difficult situations where we feel like, getting away would make this better. But even, I'm sure, tell me now, when you went to Madrid, I'm sure you still felt,
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I had, wasn't unfortunately, it wasn't that I went to Madrid and then everything was rosy and it was all forgotten about and blah, blah, far from it. But it definitely offered some respite, for sure. Some relief. It wasn't so oppressive. But then things would happen, wherever it was, whatever triggered me, and then that would be it. And then you'd quickly fall back into it. The fact that I was in Madrid then made no difference. But it was a good distraction, making new friends, being in a city that I love, perfecting a language that I love. It was a good distraction, and maybe a needed one. I don't know. Maybe if I stayed at home, maybe I would have just gone downhill very, very quickly. Maybe inside, who knows? I'm never going to know the answers to those questions. But yeah, it wasn't a complete escape, but it was a partial one, or let's say a substantial one, for sure.
Yeah, man, it's interesting, because
when I hear a lot of people in recovery talk about when they were addicted to alcohol and drugs, they were almost a bit grateful for the existence of these substances, because without these substances, they may have done something more final. So, you know, you were saying, oh yeah, I went to Madrid, but if I didn't go to Madrid, I don't really know what could have happened. Something, you know, something more serious I could have gone down a spiral, and maybe the move to Madrid could have acted as your drug or your alcohol, you know. I do think sometimes there are healthy distractions.
Yeah, I think you can only confront something when you're ready to confront it, ultimately. And I've been trying to do it since it's happened. And like I said, in the moment I did it in a way that I'm proud of, and then since then I've been trying to do it for my own self, rather than to protect the person it happened to. And I've done that to varying success rates and achieve different outcomes, because I've done it from different places. When I say different places, I don't mean geographically, I mean like personally speaking. And I feel like now it keeps on an upward trend, and I keep on getting better, and I keep on I find more peace with the situation. But I feel like now I'm in a situation where I can remedy it from the right place, not from a place of anger or from a place of vengeance or anything like that, because any outcome that I would have got working from that place would have been giving me temporary relief or happiness, but then I would have eventually come to, and I would have eventually gone, that was really shitty, and I haven't actually, all I've done is I've made someone else feel terrible, or whatever the case may be. Do you know what I mean? I feel like now I'm in a place where I can achieve or work toward achieve long-lasting peace with that situation, and hopefully repair some very burnt bridges. That's the aim, you know. And I was talking to my dad about it recently, and I was saying, with the obvious exception, and this is obvious, you know, I don't think we should ever judge someone off their worst moment. Now, with the obvious exception of the paedophile, you know, but my aunties and everyone else who have, you know, it was a moment of cowardice, or maybe you could say it's 4 years of cowardice, because they still haven't really come to. But either way, it was cowardice, and it was something that we wouldn't have expected. I don't want, whilst I won't forget it, and whilst it's definitely a footnote in their story, and that's a shame that they will have to carry and that they will have to live with, I don't want that to tarnish too much the image and the relationship that we had before that, because ultimately they were and they are good women who failed massively in a very important scenario. But is that enough to write them off as people and just go, to hell, they're burnt, like that's it now, they're dead to me? And I also think holding the grudge does more harm to me than it does to the person I'm holding the grudge with, because ultimately they will accept the fact that I'm not talking to them anymore, and they'll just move on with their life, and they'll go, look, I wanted to be friends with him, or I wanted to rekindle their relationship, but he's not open to it, and it will hurt them for a while, but eventually they'll move on. That's just the way of life. But if I'm the one who is holding the grudge, it's an energy to do that. I mean, it takes real energy, and it's not a positive energy at all. It's just sapping any goodness and any positivity from me whenever it comes up. And I just thought, and it's just ridiculous. I mean, it's just having too much of an effect on me. It's having too much of an effect, a subliminal effect on my good relationships with other people, because, like I said, it's sapping away. It's draining me slowly. It's like a little fucking vampire. It's just like sucking the blood slowly, like a little leech or something that's just there, and I can't get rid of it. And I just thought, this is just ridiculous. So I've made calls. I'm planning to, when Corona's decides to piss off, to go to Italy and try to rekindle some sort of relationship. I'm not stupid. I'm not naive. I don't think we will ever be happy families completely. You know, I don't think we're going to be like The Sound of Music in the Hills with daisies in our hair. But I would like to rekindle some sort of relationship. I would like to be able to visit, and I would like to, when I have kids of my own, to take them over and to show them a part of my heritage, and not an arbitrary part of my heritage. Not, I don't want to go to just Rome randomly, be like, oh yeah, I'm Italian. Isn't Rome great? No, I want to go to where I feel I have roots in Italy, and that's Milan, and that's Nova Milanese, and that's and places I frequented throughout my childhood. And I can only do that if I work towards it. And ultimately, I'm sure they feel shameful, and if they don't yet, I'm sure they will do at some point. I'm sure eventually. They're good people at heart. They've made a massive mistake. Well, I'll accept that, but I do think they're good people at heart. I just think they were cowardly, which is something that I knew that I didn't want to be seen as. So that's why I acted how I've acted. Maybe it wasn't such a priority to them, but I understand whether the fact that I don't agree with how they acted. I've now come to a point where I can at least understand why they acted the way they have. I will always question why they did, and it will always be a source of disappointment for me that these people that I held on such high esteem didn't act the way I would have hoped they had, and didn't show me that they had the character that I always thought they did have, because ultimately they proved otherwise. That said, I don't want to carry on with the rest of my life hating these people or anything like it, and it causes more damage. This whole fiasco has sent shockwaves through the family anyway. I kind of want to put a stop to that as much as I can anyway. I can't force anyone else to come on this journey with me. Like I said, if my mom or my dad or my sister or anyone else, they don't want to do this with me, it's their own journey, and I can't force them to come on that with me. But I myself, I can make sure that my relationship with them is better. Maybe by doing that as well, I think maybe I can help them, and not in a self-righteous way, but help them see the error of their ways. Because I think now it's almost like we're almost on two sides of the fence, and we're just so partisan, and it's like, oh, I can't see how you would ever act that way. And they're like, oh, well, I don't believe it ever happened, or whatever the case may be. And I think maybe if we open up and we say, look, this is the effect. I mean, it wasn't just the sexual abuse. It was all the ripples after that. Look at what it's done. Look at how your cowardice has added to the ripples of the sexual abuse, and how if you just accept the reality, it's a shit reality, I understand. But if you accept it for what it is and try to improve it, then you can stop adding to those ripples. Then the ripples will only emanate from him and from the abuse. But we can work as a family to rekindle that notion of family, because at the moment it's dead in the water. And that's really upsetting, because I know I'm going on a bit of a rant, but for me to even question the notion of family is earth-shattering. Because, I mean, you're living now with Chiara. It's not to say that every Italian family is perfect, but my God, do they value it above everything else. And once that goes, it's like the foundation, the pillars of everything you believe just crumble. And so for me to get to a point where I questioned what was the point of family, did I even believe, was it a social construct? The fact that we share a bit of DNA and maybe the same last name, what does that even mean? Do you know what I mean? The fact that I was even asking myself these questions was obliterated me. And I now understand that I can't go forward as a nomad and pretend that I don't have a family or whatever the case may be. And look, I've got the family I've got, they're the cards I've been dealt. So I have to make the best out of that hand, and wishing that they were all saints. It's great to do, but it's never going to happen. I know who they are now, and I just need to accept them for that. And maybe on that journey of acceptance, maybe they can improve, and maybe they can show me that they're better than they are in their worst moments. That's at least the hope that I have.
Yeah, it's I guess the journey that you've been on would maybe give you further hope that other people can quite significantly change their opinions on something, or change their perspectives on things that you thought couldn't be changed. Like you said, if we had this 6 months ago, you'd probably tell me, Jim, like, these things are ridiculous, and why would I go to Italy? He's a scumbag, etc., etc. And I don't know, has your transformation now changed how you look at people and say, hey, yeah, this person did this, or these people acted in this certain way, but that's what they did, and I did things that I'm not proud of, but look at me now, Has that helped?
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, there's exceptions. Okay. And so whilst I'm trying to be more as compassionate as I can be in this moment in time, there are still for me some non-negotiables. Okay. And one of them is, if you're a paedophile, I'm sorry, but for me, that's 3 strikes and you're out. And there's no the best case scenario, as far as I'm concerned, is that he would accept what he has done and try to repent. Now, that does not mean that if he did that, I would welcome him with open arms. Far from it. But at least I would see that there was some humanity left in him. At least. But that's not the case. Okay, fine. That's not the case. Maybe he will come to. Maybe he will take it to his grave, and he will think that he's pulled the wool over everyone's eyes, and everyone's still. But it is what it is. Years to come, he'll be a gravestone, and I will tell people freely what he did, and then people can make their own minds up. That said, if you don't form part of those exceptions, which is, paedophilia and such like, then yes, I do believe that, like I said, we shouldn't. It's easy to pass judgment. I've done it. I'm the first to admit I've done it. When my parents got divorced, I was very quick to say, oh, this is terrible and this is this and blah, 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 and whatever the case may be. But where does it get you and what does it do? It doesn't do anything. It fills you with, okay, you might have inflicted a bit of pain, which in the moment might feel somewhat good. But actually then you feel like even more of a scumbag anyway. You feel even more shit. And I don't, I don't want to go too much into the argument of good or bad people, because that's for another podcast. But one thing that I do believe, whether you believe that there are people who are inherently good or inherently bad, or whatever the case may be, or that no one's a good or a bad person, we are just people. Whatever your belief system is, mine is, you get judged on the consistency of your actions and your decisions. And so I'm not sure if there are inherently good or bad people. But if you're consistently good and you consistently do good things, you're allowed the odd fuck up. As long as it's not too serious, like I say, but you're allowed the odd fuck up. Okay. If you consistently fuck up and then you do a good thing every now and again, that does not mean you're a good person to me. And so he's a great example of that. He, on the face of things, did great things. He was a nice bloke, affable person. Talk to him. He'd help you out, whatever the case may be. But he consistently sexually abused, as far as we know, 2 people in my family. Lord knows that there may be a few others in my family who don't want to come out, or people outside of the family. I don't know, but I know that there's 2 for sure. As a minimum, it's 2, which is bad enough. 1 is far too many. So he is, to me, a bad person. If he repented and he tried to whatever, then okay, that's a different conversation. I'd say, well, at least he has some humanity. As far as my aunties go, or whoever else who kind of has been cowardly, like I said, yes, it was shit of them to do. It was a shit scenario, and it's not something that I'll forget. Don't get me wrong. But I think they are good people at heart. I just think they were very cowardly when they should have been courageous. What can I do about that? Like I said, you can't. I'm thankful that I recognized in the moment that that was the moment to be courageous, because I knew that once that moment passed, I couldn't go back. And if I was cowardly like them, even if I supported, so to speak, the survivor, but didn't go above and beyond, I would always hate myself for that. And I honestly believe, I think that's enough of a punishment. It's not for me to dish out punishment or to dish out whatever. I think in the cold light of day, they will hate themselves to some extent for what they've done. And that's not enough for me, but that's like, do you know what I mean? They don't need more than that. They brought that on themselves, I'll say that, but I don't need to add to that, And so I'm trying my best to make sure that we can, looking forward, can have some sort of positive relationship. And added to the fact that, look, I'm not sure he'll ever go to prison now, because it is what it is. We didn't take it to court because at the time the person was very young, and it was you'd have to relive it through court and all the rest of it. And it's, you have to relive the whole situation again, and to real stringent questions and everything else. And he would have had a lawyer trying to prove him innocent, and we didn't go through that process. That day may come. That's up to the survivor to decide whether that day will come or not. But he's an old man. He will die soon enough. And when he does, I want us as a family to be able to move forward. I don't want him to have an everlasting effect on it, you know?
It's really it's great to see, man. Like, I really am proud of you. Like, it is like, again, I can't put myself in your shoes, so again, I can only think from the perspective I've had where I haven't had such instances. But maybe for people listening who sorry, a few things I want to say. One, this is recorded before our conversation with Dr. James Cantor, a paedophilic expert, which is interesting in itself, because perhaps you have a new opinion when people are listening to this. The second thing I wanted to say or ask was, I remember we were talking before, and you were talking about how I want to make this podcast applicable for other people as well. Maybe not just experiencing a very, very similar instance, but I think we can all relate to the idea of being filled with anger towards a certain person, a certain group, a certain team, a certain thing, you know?
Yeah, whatever it may be.
Whatever it may be. And again, it would be nice if you think, no, like, I want to just say to this person experiencing this hate, hey, like, it can change.
Yeah, for sure. I don't want to be so egotistical that I would think of myself as an inspiration to others, as much as maybe I would love that deep down. But no, I think this, like you said, you don't have to have gone through sexual abuse or vice versa, or like yourself, or be a friend or close relation to someone who has suffered sexual abuse to relate to the story. At least I hope not. I think like I said at the very start of the podcast, the goal of this hour odd is to offer some sort of hope to people who are maybe in the mire right now and can't see a way out, whatever that situation may be, whether that is you're struggling with addiction, you're struggling with depression, you're struggling with depression because of sexual abuse, or because your parents have got divorced, or because your girlfriend's just left you, because you've just lost your job, or whatever the case may be. It's just, I think it's really good to accept those dark feelings, because they're natural, and you can't make out, unless you are some sort of Dalai Lama, you can't pretend that that's not part of you or whatever. It's part of the process. And I think you have to accept those. You have to come to terms with those. You have to get comfortable with them, to be quite honest. And then you have to work through that. Because I'm not sure if it's in a podcast with one of our guests, Jim, or whether I just heard it in another podcast or I'd read it somewhere. But someone said, and I wish I knew who it was now, but someone said basically the suffering starts and stops with you. You can choose when it ends. And when I heard that, I can't remember, I think it might have been on one of our guests, but when I heard that, I thought, what a load of shite. I mean, this person clearly doesn't know what it is to suffer, and they're just talking from this airy-fairy bollocks like world where, oh yeah, you can choose. And I was like, this is a load of rubbish, but whatever. Everyone's each to their own. Everyone can have their own opinions. The more I've come along the journey, the more I realize that is the case, and it's up to each and every one of us whether we want to sit and wallow in those deep and dark emotions, or whether, yes, like I said, get comfortable with them, accept them, but then also have an end point. Whenever you're ready, I'm not saying you should choose a date. Right, 15th of October, I'm working through this. It will come naturally to you, but be ready to have that and accept that you actually want for yourself, if nothing else, like Richard Moore said, good selfish. If nothing else, be selfish enough to want better for yourself. Mm-hmm. And to want a better life, and not to want to suffer anymore. And that comes by working through it. And I think this is a story that I hope anyway can really apply to many people, because people, get into ruts for loads of different things, and they might get into different ruts at different stages of their life. It's not to say that now I've come through this, I will now forevermore know how to deal with horrible situations, because God forbid Louisa splits up with me tomorrow and I'm sadder than Eeyore. Do you know what I mean? But at the moment, I feel a bit like Tigger, and so it is what it is. We've got to work through it. And I just hope that people who are listening can take that, at the very least, the notion that it will come to an end, and be ready and look forward to that end. and then move on with your life and choose. And like I said, I thought it was bollocks. Whoever it was that said that thing, I thought it was an absolute load of shite. But it is true. The suffering does start with you and it ends with you. You can choose if you want that suffering to carry on, or if you don't, and if you want to put an end to it, and if you think you deserve more from your life and you deserve happiness, or at least you deserve the pursuit of happiness. And I think when you make that decision, I think that's a real game changer, because once you make that decision, then, to use a cliche, the world can be your oyster, I think. But it's a hard one, I think, as well. The other thing, Jim, I'll say, and you kind of mentioned it on one of the podcasts that's going to come out next year. I feel bad for these people. We're constantly referencing podcasts that's going to come out in 2021. Bear with us, folks. But you said something along the lines of like how your dad keeps on harping back to the old times, and he's almost consciously self-inflicting suffering. And there's something to that. You can become almost too comfortable with the suffering. Mm-hmm. You can almost think you deserve it. I've had these weird warped notions that if only I could take all the suffering of my family on my own shoulders, I would deal with it. Like if I could alleviate all of them, well, it doesn't even fucking work that way. What kind of weird notion is that? I'm going to go to God or some weird being and say, oh, that suffering you dished out to X, Y, and Z. Yeah, take that back and give it to me as if it's some sort of fucking KFC order. I mean, it's ridiculous. But I was having these thoughts because you almost find it like, I don't know, like noble or something. Like, oh yeah, I'm suffering and I'm dealing with it and I like the suffering. And, do you know what I mean? And it's like, there's nothing noble. There's nothing good. Deal with it. You have to deal with it. You can't shirk it, but want better for yourself. I think we all deserve that.
What I think, to quote our good friend of the podcast, Will, he says it's easy to get clean or it's easy to get sober. It's tough to stay sober. And I think this can be applied to the mental health journey that we're all on. But even for this context, like you said, it is a journey. It's a constant process. And tomorrow we could be talking, and unless you're focused or unless you're consciously trying to, like you said, keep on this route per se. Like you said, you mentioned your plans for the new year.
Did I? What are my plans for the new year?
I believe you said it was your intention to go see a therapist.
Oh yeah. Sorry, we mentioned that in private. I didn't know. But yeah, no. Yeah, for sure. Like, look, I mean, it wasn't you outing me there. I think I've done enough outing myself in this podcast. But yeah, no, yeah. Like, I want to, because I think I've done a lot of work on myself by myself. And like I said, that's definitely, we've benefited from having great conversations with great people, and that has been a massive help. And they've almost been therapists in a way. I feel like we're kind of sponging off them, to be quite honest. Maybe we should send them like 50 quid in the post. But all jokes aside, no, I would like to, because I think it's important. There's definitely things there that I haven't worked on, or that even if I wanted to work on, I need professional help to do so. And with the best will in the world, I can have the greatest guests on the podcast, but I need someone to talk to me about my situation. And whilst I do try to glean as much as I can from arbitrary situations and general things, sometimes you just need someone to speak to you about a very specific problem. And I think I need that. And I understand that I need that. So now it's and I thought, could I do it in Spanish? And I thought, nah, I need it to be in English, because whilst my Spanish is good and I could definitely get my point across, I can't have any road bumps. I can't have any stumbling blocks. I need to express myself fully and completely, so that they can then help me the best way they can. Because otherwise, I'm holding them back. I'm paying them to do a job and then not actually allowing them to do it properly. So yeah, I'm going to try and find an English therapist in Madrid, which may be harder than that sounds. But yeah, because I realize I need to do it. And like I said, it's a journey. By no means am I under any illusions that this is all groovy and that now I'm going to be just this happy-go-lucky, constantly always cheery. In fact, it's one of the reasons why I wanted to record it now, as in today, because who knows what I'll be like tomorrow. Maybe another one of those dreams and all of a sudden I'm back there again, So I understand that, but I used to say a lot, it is what it is. And I think I used to say it as a throwaway line. I now really have come to terms with that saying. It is what it is. And I now really accept what that means. And so now when I say I truly mean it, it is what it is. It's the situation I'm in now. It's the cards I've been dealt. I'm trying to do the best with it now. I might find myself in a rut in a couple of months, and I'll do my best to get myself out of that rut as well, but at the moment, a day at a time. And that's all you can do, really. I think not too many plans is probably a good thing. But I'm happy because I'm happy that I want myself to be happy. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense, man. And I think a lot of us struggle with that. Like, accepting that's really what we want, and not other things that are maybe being pursued instead of this. I just want peace of mind. I think that's really what we want. We want peace of mind, and we think that other things will bring us peace of mind, but very often they don't.
No, I mean, listen, if someone wants to send me £1 million out of the kindness of their heart, then that's fine. I'll put my bank details in the show notes. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that will really give me peace of mind, although it might make me fairly happy for a little while. But I think it's momentary happiness. But yeah, no, look. To try and end it on a positive note, that's all I'd say. If anyone's listened all the way through, I really appreciate it. I hope it gives people who are listening some understanding as to why I say things the way I say them, or think like the way I think about certain. Yeah, the Italian problem. This is the Italian problem, and it's hard, but it is what it is, and I've got to accept it. I think I have accepted it to some extent anyway. I'm sure there's more acceptance to come, because there's definitely anger still there. I'm not trying to make out that I'm not angry. There's definitely some still anger still there that needs to get worked on and needs to get flushed out, but there's less than there was, substantially less. I think maybe you can attest to that, because the last time we recorded this podcast, I felt a bit sorry for you. It was basically me here for an hour, just absolutely unleashing, just ranting. And I don't think it would have done anyone any good to listen to that, to be quite honest. But maybe it was needed as well. Maybe I needed to get that off my chest. But yeah, I really appreciate people listening. And we're going to try for next year to get, like you already alluded to get James Cantor on, who is an expert in, I think it's sexology. I think, is that a term? I don't know. But if not, in the sex world, like the science behind sex and all that type of jazz, he's an expert in it. And one of those things is pedophilia. And it's me coming to an acceptance that I actually want to learn more about it. And that's why we've got him on. I wouldn't have had him on 3 months ago, or even a month ago. I don't think I would have had him on, So we're going to try and work through it, because I know some people will be listening to this, and they will, whilst I said that I hope anyone can listen and learn, there are going to be some people who have really, the story is almost parallel, almost identical. And for those people, I want to say, this isn't a one and done. This isn't the first and last time we're going to talk about sexual abuse. We're going to keep on banging the drum, because if I could have one aim in my life, it would genuinely be to get rid of the shame that it causes people, because there should be no shame there attached whatsoever. It's got nothing. The survivors and the loving family members of that survivor, they should feel no shame, because it wasn't a problem of theirs. These are master manipulators, and that would be my big message. So we're going to keep on working. We're going to keep on banging the drum. We're going to hopefully keep on getting great guests on. And I just really appreciate everyone's support. It's been great. And I appreciate you, Jim, for doing this and having the conversation with me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, man. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for listening, everybody. And if you have any questions, let us know. We love to hear back from the fans.
Exactly. So send them through to our email, our Twitter, our Instagram, wherever it may be. Send them through. And if someone's listening to this and they want to send me a personal question, they've never met me in their life, feel free. Send me a question on my Twitter or Instagram, my personal ones. None of them are private, so you can find me on there, and I'll happily answer any of your questions or point you towards some good people who can maybe help you out, or whatever the case may be. I'd love to do that, yeah, for sure. But until next time, guys, thank you very much. Actually, next time, if I am correct, Next time is a reflection podcast where we're just going to look back on the year and then look forward to 2021. Obviously, in this podcast, we've spoken a bit about what's coming in the next year, but we're just really excited. And we've had some great guests that I've already been on, so we're going to kind of reflect on those, some of the key points. And also, it's just a bit of a homage to all of our listeners, a bit of a thank you to everyone who supported us along the way, because we honestly had no idea we'd be at this place so quickly. We really, really didn't, and that's truthful. So I really appreciate everyone who's listened. Massive love to all of you.
Thank you.
Hi guys, thank you for listening to the podcast. Please don't forget to subscribe and leave a 5-star review if you haven't already. Every review helps us climb the podcast charts so that even more of you can listen to our amazing guests. We really appreciate the support. Remember to tune in next week, but until then, keep safe and have a good one.